On February 26, 2022, the West fired a weapon that travels at the speed of light. No explosion, no casualties, no smoke rising over a city. Just a few keystrokes in a secure building in Belgium. Within 72 hours, 140 million Russians woke up to discover their credit cards didn't work. Their savings had evaporated by 30%. Their economy, the 11th largest on Earth, was being slowly strangled by invisible hands 8,000 miles away. This is the war you weren't taught about. The one where bullets are replaced by banking codes, where nuclear powers are brought to their knees, not by aircraft carriers, but by accountants, where the most dangerous weapon in the American arsenal isn't stored in a silo in Wyoming. It lives inside a financial system that most people don't even know exists. And here's the uncomfortable part. You're already inside it. Let's start with a question that sounds simple, but isn't. What happens when the most powerful nations on Earth decide they're done dropping bombs? The answer is they find something more precise, more surgical, more devastating in ways that don't show up on the evening news. They discovered that if you control how money moves around the world, you don't need to control anything else. See, there's a building in a suburb outside Brussels. Nothing special about it, glass and concrete. A few hundred employees. You'd drive past it without a second look. It's called SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Sounds boring. That's by design. Because this building handles the instructions for approximately $5 trillion worth of transactions every single day. Not the money itself, the messages, the authorization codes, the digital handshakes that allow your bank to talk to another bank in Tokyo or London or Sao Paulo. SWIFT is the nervous system of global finance. And when you get disconnected from it, you don't just lose access to international trade. You become a financial ghost. Let me explain how this works without putting you to sleep. Every international transaction involving dollars at some point flows through a US bank. Has to, but by design. If a German company wants to pay a Brazilian supplier in dollars, that payment will briefly touch the American banking system. Just for a moment, just long enough for the US government to see it. And if the US government decides they don't like that transaction, they can stop it. Not just for American companies, for anyone, anywhere, using dollars. This is why SWIFT matters. But this is also why the dollar itself is the weapon. Roughly 88% of all international trade is conducted in dollars. 88%. That means if you're a country that wants to buy semiconductors from Taiwan, jet engines from France, or wheat from Australia, you probably need dollars to do it. And if America decides you can't have them, you're not just locked out of American trade. You're locked out of the entire global economy. The Iranian foreign minister once said something that captures this perfectly. He said the United States has kidnapped the global financial system and holds it hostage. Strong words, but also not entirely wrong. Because the thing about the dollar's dominance is that it wasn't designed as a weapon. It evolved into one. The same infrastructure that makes international commerce fast and efficient also creates a chokepoint. And whoever controls that chokepoint controls who gets to play. So did it work? Did this invisible war bring Russia to its knees? Well, here's where we have to be honest about the gap between headlines and reality. In the weeks after the sanctions hit, Western media was full of triumphant predictions. The ruble crashed. Russians rushed to ATMs. Economists predicted a 30% contraction in Russian GDP. It looked like economic warfare was going to accomplish in months what military force might take years to achieve. The narrative was seductive. Putin had miscalculated. His war machine would grind to a halt. His population would turn against him. Regime change through spreadsheets, except that's not what happened. The ruble crashed and then it recovered. In fact, by June 2022, it was stronger than before the war. Russian GDP contracted by only 2% in 2022, nowhere close to the apocalyptic predictions. Inflation spiked, yes, but the Russian economy didn't collapse. It adapted. The country found new customers for its oil in China and India. It built parallel payment systems with friendly nations. It hoarded gold and yuan. It learned to route around the sanctions like water flowing around a rock. The uncomfortable math is this. Sanctions are excellent at causing pain. They're terrible at achieving strategic goals. Iran has been under sanctions since 2012. It still has a nuclear program. Cuba has been under sanctions since 1962. The Castros died of old age, not regime change. North Korea has been the most sanctioned nation on Earth for decades. It's built more nuclear weapons, not fewer. And Russia? Russia is still fighting in Ukraine. Its defense industry is operating at capacity. Its population, while suffering, hasn't revolted. There's a dark irony here. The weapon that was supposed to make war obsolete keeps being used against countries that refuse to stop fighting. Either the weapon doesn't work, or the people deploying it have wildly unrealistic expectations about what money can accomplish versus what armies can accomplish. Maybe both, but the consequences of this financial war extend far beyond Russia. And this is where the story takes a turn that should concern anyone paying attention. The rest of the world has been watching carefully. Because here's the thing about weaponizing the global financial system. Once you do it, you can't unring that bell. Every country on Earth now knows that their dollar reserves, their access to SWIFT, and their ability to trade internationally exist only at the pleasure of the United States and its allies. That's fine if you're from Germany or Japan. Not so fine if you're from China or Saudi Arabia or India or Brazil or any country that might one day find itself on the wrong side of Washington's preferences. So what are they doing about it? They're building alternatives, quietly, methodically, without announcing it on the front page. China and Russia now settle most of their trade in rubles and yuan. India has been buying Russian oil in rupees and dirhams. Saudi Arabia, America's closest ally in the Middle East for half a century, has begun accepting yuan for oil sales to China. Brazil and Argentina announced a plan to create a common currency for South American trade. The BRICS nations are developing their own payment messaging system to compete with SWIFT. None of these alternatives are ready to replace the dollar. Not yet, not even close. The dollar still dominates because nothing else offers the same liquidity, stability, and depth of markets. Replacing the dollar would be like replacing the English language as the global medium of communication. Theoretically possible, practically almost impossible. But here's what matters. The direction of travel has changed. For the first time in 80 years, countries are actively trying to reduce their dependence on the dollar. Not because they love the yuan, but because they fear the weapon. And that fear creates a paradox. Every time America uses financial sanctions to punish an adversary, it accelerates the process of de-dollarization. The more powerful the weapon proves to be, the more incentive other countries have to escape from under its umbrella. It's like a protection racket, where the enforcer is a little too enthusiastic. Eventually, the neighborhood starts looking for alternatives. There's another layer to this that rarely gets discussed. It affects regular people, innocent people. When sanctions cut off a country from the global financial system, the ruling elite usually find ways around them. They have private jets, shell companies in Dubai, gold bars in Swiss vaults. But ordinary citizens don't have those options. They just watch their currency collapse and their savings disappear. In Iran, the sanctions contributed to medicine shortages. In Venezuela, economic isolation worsened an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis. In Russia, young professionals who had nothing to do with Putin's war watched their career prospects evaporate as Western companies fled. The theory of sanctions is that economic pain will cause populations to pressure their governments to change course. The reality is that desperate populations often rally around their leaders against the external enemy causing their suffering. Nationalism tends to defeat inflation in the short term. The United States possesses the most powerful economic weapon in human history. A weapon that can cripple nations without firing a single shot. A weapon that operates through the very infrastructure of global commerce itself. And yet, the track record of this weapon in achieving its stated objectives is questionable at best. Iran still enriches uranium. Russia still fights in Ukraine. North Korea still develops missiles. Cuba is still Cuba. Meanwhile, the collateral damage keeps piling up. Trust in the dollar, as a neutral medium of exchange, erodes with every sanction imposed. The global financial system, once built on the assumption that money would remain separate from politics, is now becoming openly, unmistakably politicized. And the countries that feel threatened aren't standing still. They're building alternative architectures, systems that may take decades to mature, but that will eventually fragment the unified framework that made American financial hegemony possible in the first place. There's a concept in economics known as the Triffin dilemma. It describes the tension between a currency's domestic needs and its role as the world's reserve. But today, there's a new dilemma. Call it the weaponization paradox. The more you use the financial system as a weapon, the more you undermine the very dominance that makes that weapon effective. Every sanction is a small withdrawal from a finite bank account of credibility. And the most dangerous part? Nobody knows exactly when that account runs empty. What does the world look like when money stops being neutral? When every transaction carries implicit political risk, when countries maintain parallel financial systems the way they maintain separate military alliances, we're finding out in real time. The war in Ukraine is the first major conflict where economic warfare has been deployed at this scale against a nuclear power. And the results so far are inconclusive. Russia is hurt, but not broken. The West has demonstrated its financial power, and just as clearly its limits. And the rest of the world is watching closely, drawing lessons that will shape the next 50 years of global finance. Here's what nobody wants to admit. We've entered an era where the line between economics and warfare has completely dissolved, where a central banker can be as strategically important as a general, where the real battlefield isn't a grid square on a military map, but a network diagram of correspondent banking relationships. This is the war that never ends, because it never officially begins. A war fought in spreadsheets and wire transfers. A war where the casualties are measured in inflation rates and currency devaluations instead of body counts. The missiles were replaced by money. And now, money itself is being replaced by something else entirely. A fragmented world where every transaction becomes a choice between competing systems, where neutrality becomes impossible, where the infrastructure of global commerce turns into just another front in an endless great power competition. That building in Brussels still processes $5 trillion a day. The dollar still dominates international trade. American financial hegemony still looks unassailable. But cracks don't announce themselves. They spread, quietly, invisibly, until the moment everything shifts. The uncomfortable question isn't whether the money weapon works. It's what happens when everyone else decides they need one too.